أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه وسلم. Alhamdulillah, today we're completing part 2 of our tafsir. So last week we looked at the first part of tafsir. So what process do the ulama take when they make tafsir of the Quran? And we looked at things like what the meaning of tafsir was. And we looked at some of the main Sahabi when it came to tafsir. Who were the Sahaba that were known to give tafsir, and who were the Sahaba known to, I guess, be ulama in that field? Sahaba, they're all great in their own respects, but some had special talents or special fields that they focused on. And we looked at Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, and we looked at Abdullah ibn Abbas radiyallahu anhum. And from that, we also looked at the sources of tafsir. So when the ulama go to tafsir, what do they look at, or where do they go? So we said the first form is, does the Quran give tafsir of itself? So tafsir, tafsir of the Quran via the Quran. And then we looked at the tafsir of the Quran through the sayings of the Prophet ﷺ, so through the Sunnah. The Prophet ﷺ give a translation on, or a tafsir on that ayah that was sent down, or the surah, or whatever it would be. Then, like we just mentioned, we said we looked at the tafsir of the Sahabi. Obviously, they were around the Prophet ﷺ, and they received that information firsthand. And that's where obviously we looked at the Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, no, Abdullah ibn Abbas radiyallahu anhum. The last two, we said the tabi'in. So obviously some of the Sahabi had students. I said from their students, some of the tabi'in gave a tafsir of the Quran that they heard from the Sahabi. And we said, like we look at today, we said if there's a consensus amongst the tabi'in on a tafsir of something that can contradict each other, even though we might not find it in the Sunnah or from the sayings of the Sahabi directly, then we take that as a solid ground. And the last one is, if we don't find it in any of those, then we go back to Lugha. Right, so we go back to the Arabic language. How can we interpret this verse through the Arabic language? So they're the steps that are taken when a mufassir he gives tafsir of any ayah. Again, they're not interchangeable. So if the Quran, if we find tafsir of the Quran in the Quran main source, then if we can't find it in the Quran, then we go to the sayings of the Prophet ﷺ. So if we're put with a scenario where the Prophet ﷺ has given tafsir of an ayah, it's clear in an authentic hadith, and then someone wants to say about that doesn't conform, for instance, with the Arabic language, then we actually, the Arabic language comes second after the saying of the Prophet ﷺ. The Quran was sent down upon the Prophet ﷺ. So obviously, even if he goes, not that it would, but if he, for any instance, it did, and someone said, oh, but this is what it should mean in Lugha, then no, we reject that. And like we said, so, and then the process goes on from there. If we find that in the sayings of the Sahabas, Ibn Abbas said so-and-so about a certain ayah, then we take that, even if someone wants to argue that it doesn't conform to the Arabic language. Wallahu a'lam. So today we're going to look at tafsir from the tabi'in, and then we're going to look at some of the main sources of tafsir. So what do the ulama go to? And we'll look at that a bit, which again is an extremely interesting topic as well. We highlighted last week the importance of tafsir. Well, the kitab of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is our guidance. It's Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's gift to us. And it's guidance for all mankind in every aspect whatsoever. So that's why we emphasize so much on the importance of tafsir and having the ilm to give. So word of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when you look at even amongst the Sahaba, they were afraid to give tafsir of ayat of the Quran because it's the words of Allah. Imagine I would make a mistake. Imagine I'd make a mistake in the interpretation of the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive us. And Allah, we try to repeat what our predecessors said. So when we look at, for instance, from our notes, the tafsir from the tabi'in, the three main geographical areas that the main tabi'in came from, we break it up into three. So we look at the tabi'in from Mecca, and then we look at the tabi'in from Al-Madinah Al-Munawwara, and then we look at the tabi'in from Iraq also, and they were generally where the main tabi'in came from. They were the hot hubs, I guess, of that time, of whether the main hubs of ilm were when it came to the Sahaba and the tabi'in. Wallahu a'lam. So we're going to look at the mufassirin from the tabi'in from the area of Mecca. So in Mecca, who was well known? There's a handful that are well known. We'll delve into maybe just a couple of them and get a bit of a background about them. But these are generally the students of Ibn Abbas radiyallahu anhu. Ibn Abbas stayed teaching in and around that area. So many of his students, or these tabi'in that we will mention, are the students of Ibn Abbas. I mean, you'll see from some of the quotes that they give and some of the narrations that they give that they were students of Ibn Abbas. And from them, we'll mention 5 of them. We had Mujahid ibn Jabr, which is considered, we'll go into a bit of information of him, was considered maybe one of the main students of Ibn Abbas and one of the main tabi'in when it came to the tafsir of the Quran. We have Ata ibn Abi Rabah, again, one of the main students of Ibn Abbas. We have Ikrimah, Mawla ibn Abbas. So Mawla ibn Abbas means the freed slave of Ibn Abbas. Tawus is another very interesting one. Tawus ibn Kaysan and Sa'id ibn Jabr. So they're the main, I guess, maybe the top, top 5 of the tabi'in in Mecca. So they're the ones that were known in Mecca. And like we said, from them we have Mujahid radiyallahu anhu, who was, again, like we said, is considered maybe one of the most favorite student of Ibn Abbas radiyallahu anhu. He had such a high status radiyallahu anhu that it was even respected amongst the Sahaba. And like we said, he became a specialist in the field of tafsir. So that it wouldn't have been inappropriate for others to come and ask him when it came to this field. And he was very confident. I want to focus in on the confidence that these tabi'in had. They had their knowledge, and obviously they were extremely cautious, and we see this in the life of the Sahaba and the Tabi'in, but they knew that they understood the importance of them having a certain knowledge and the importance of them conveying that knowledge, and people coming to them and not going elsewhere and getting distracted or getting the wrong information. You know, we hear from Mujahid radiallahu anhu where he said, I read the Quran under Ibn Abbas, he said 3 times where I would stop, and after each verse ask him about it. Maybe he'd ask things like, where was it revealed? What does it mean? Is there tafsir on it, etc. So from Ibn Abbas, he went through the whole Quran 3 times. We need to keep in mind, we're probably thinking, I've read something maybe 20 times. And these guys had phenomenal memories, radiallahu anhum. So for him to go over it 3 times, it means he got a great deal of knowledge from Ibn Abbas. And like I said, we've mentioned the merits of Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu and his status when it came to understanding the Quran and giving tafsir of the Quran, radiallahu anhu. So he had that ability. He says something like maybe so many times, 30 to 40 times, he would have read the whole Quran with Ibn Abbas without a tafsir, but he had that deep knowledge of the Quran, yani 1 generation away from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So you would see in some of the books of Tafsir where they would say, Mujahid said so and so. They might not even link it back to Ibn Abbas radiallahu anh, but if Mujahid said it, then we have then definitely he got that from Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu. And even Ibn Abbas says something in Tafsir, then we generally be inclined towards it radiallahu anhu. Another one another very interesting one or another interesting tabi'i from Mecca, again the student of Ibn Abbas, is Ikrimah. So Ikrimah Mawla Ibn Abbas, like we said, he was the Mawla, so he was the freed slave of Ibn Abbas. And what they say about him, he was, Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu had him as a slave, but he actually educated him before he freed him. So he'd force him to sit down and learn and absorb that knowledge. And then when he became so elegant in his Quran and understanding in his Quran, he freed him, subhanAllah. But he obviously became a great teacher of the Quran, a great abid. Like they, or Ash-Shafi radiallahu anhu said of him, he said, there's none alive who is more knowledgeable in the Quran than Ikrimah. So they all had their merits in saying, he's the most knowledgeable, he's the most knowledgeable, who's the most knowledgeable in. Obviously the students that came after them would have taken knowledge from them, and you know, we praise our teachers, but they, and not a praise that's unwarranted, a praise that is very warranted of their position. Over 300 people narrated from him. Over 300 people narrated from him. 70 tabi'in narrated from him. So that means that many people took knowledge from him, and they became part of the chain of narration. That Ikrimah said so and so. Ikrimah said so and so. He says about himself, he said, everything I say regarding the Quran is from Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu. So he had that confidence. They were great students of one of the greatest men of Tafseer. So they had confidence that I'm his student. I know I'm a great student of his. And they went not to flaunt it, but yes, they understood the importance of having that knowledge and being confident in having that knowledge. You know, and we can use the example, for instance, a person that, you know, there's a fine line between being humble and being arrogant. You know, and that's where we find confidence, just in that middle, where the person, you know, if it's coming for salat, and I've heard one of our prominent sheikh as a public speaker, he said, you know what, it's like a person that's in a rural area, and there, for instance, it's time for Jum'ah, and there's only a handful of students, and they're at university, and the guys maybe a Hafiz Quran, and the other guys, maybe there's 3 or 4 other people that don't even know how to recite the Quran, and they've got, that's, oh, can you lead us? Oh, Brother, who am I? Oh, I'm so humble, and oh, I'm not worthy of this station. That person's actually made of a mistake, and then if someone else leads and makes a mistake in that salat, then that person has did a disservice to the ilm that they've attained. So we need to find, it's not, okay, I'm for this position, so I take it and I lead the salat because I'm worthy of it. You know, we all have that humbleness that maybe, or whatever, but when I know I'm the most knowledgeable person in a field, I should be confident to display that. He avoided rulers as well, Ikrimah radiallahu anhu. You see a lot of them, the tabi'ins, that have those temptations of getting tempted by rulers and given riches and that. He avoided that. And we'll look at as well, Tawus radiallahu anhu, who's also who had a Persian origins, who was also a very avid worshipper radiallahu anhu. He studied under something like 50 Sahaba. He became the grand scholar of Yemen, and they say of him, and I'll take this in the narration, that he performed the Hajj 40 times. He performed the Hajj over 40 times, and he was known to have an accepted dua radiallahu anhu. And they said, subhanAllah, you die as you live, radiallahu anhu. And he passed away in Muzdalifah, performing Hajj, radiallahu anhu. And Nawawi, which we all know the status of Imam Nawawi, he said there's a consensus amongst the scholars, that he was highly honorable. He had dignity, he was full of dignity, he was excellent in knowledge, piety, and he had memory and many other things. But you know, and Nawawi is saying, because sometimes these doubts might come about certain tabi'in or whoever it is, and people might cast assumptions and cast doubts about them. But Nawawi is confirming that he was a great scholar radiallahu anhu. Then we look at Medina. So the scholars from Al-Madinah and the tabi'in from Al-Madinah. I'm gonna look at this. Well, I'll name 2. There's Muhammad ibn Ka'ab radiallahu anhu, and there's Zayd ibn Aslam radiallahu anhu, who's also again he was the Mawla of Abdullah ibn Umar radiallahu anhu. Again, we know the status of Abdullah ibn Umar radiallahu anhu, especially when it came to the Quran. So you can see the relationship of these great teachers and the students that they're producing radiallahu anhum. Again, he was also a freed slave. So he was a slave. And he said that he was radiallahu anhu, he was a scholar under the rulership of Umar ibn Abdul Aziz as well. And he had also his kids were great, and he said he wrote his own tafsir book, and his son also narrated of him that tafsir book. So prominent was he that he had his own majlis in Imam Nawawi. And people would come and learn of him. So much so that there's a saying where once Ali ibn Hassan radiallahu anhu, who also had his own circle, would at times stand up from the people that he was sitting with, and he would go sit in Zayd radiallahu anhu's circle. And they said to him, why do you leave your people and you go and sit in the circle of a slave? And he said that a person sits with whoever that can benefit that can benefit them in their religions. So we see these great qualities from the Sahaba and the Tabi'in radiallahu anhum when it came to the knowledge, when it came to them attaining knowledge radiallahu anhum. They didn't shy away. And the last geographical area where we get some tafsir from, especially from the Tabi'in, was in Iraq. So from there we have Hassan al-Basri, who maybe you could confidently say he's probably the most well-known tabi'i radiallahu anhu. And we have Qatada ibn Di'amah radiallahu anhum. Again, they were from Iraq. Hassan al-Basri is known. He's known, he was an avid worshipper, big zahid. He saw over 120 sahabi. Just one quote about him. Al-Ghazali said radiallahu anhum, so Al-Ghazali, the well-known Imam, he said his speech was the nearest to the speech of the Prophet ﷺ, and he was the most similar to the Sahaba in guidance. He was at the peak of eloquence in language, and his wisdom flowed from him. SubhanAllah. So again, Hassan al-Basri, you hear his name being quoted. Hassan al-Basri said about this tafsir. As opposed to maybe you might not hear other tabi'in. But if you hear him, then he has that status, radiallahu anhu. And Qatada, radiallahu anhu, he was from Busra, and they say he narrated from Anas bin Malik, radiallahu anhu. We've mentioned Anas bin Malik in the past, and other Sahaba. He had a great memory. He was, radiallahu anhu, just an interesting fact about him, it said that he was born blind. He was born blind, radiallahu anhu, and he excelled that far in the Quran. It was said that he would never, whatever he heard from a muhaddith, or whatever he would from a hadith or any transmission that came to him, he would never ask the person giving him that hadith to repeat it again. He would never ask for it to be repeated again. He just had that excellent of a memory. And it said of him that he sat with certain scholars and they'd gone through books for a couple of days, and then he'd ask him, repeat to me so and so, and he mastered it. And he said, I've never met anyone like him. So subhanAllah, great memories, great devotion. They are all zahdin. They all stayed away from the temptations of this dunya, the temptations of the rulers trying to rule, I guess, bring them in and that sort of thing. Subhanallah. Qatada radiallahu anhu also had Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal radiallahu anhu, who's one of our great mashayikh and scholars of the madhahib, praised him, and he narrates a lot from Qatada radiallahu anhu. So subhanallah, he had a great status in that. So they're some of the main tabi'in. They're some of the main tabi'in when it comes to the narration of and the tafsir of the Quran. Again, like we said, from Mecca, Medina, and from Iraq. So from there we go on to, if we go to our next page, what are some of the great works done in this field of tafsir? What are some of the great works done in the field of tafsir? So from our notes we have, we've listed four. listed four. I'm going to give a bit of detail about the four. There's a number of different ways a tafsir is looked at. I guess there's a number of different ways. And ulama, the Quran is an ocean. So for someone to say, I've given the right of the tafsir, it's impossible. We've mentioned it in the past, where even an ayah of Quran is considered an ocean. It doesn't matter how much you dive into it and how much effort you put into it, then wallah, in this dunya we'll never completely understand it. It's the words of Allah. It's above creation. How could we even try to get? But it's obviously our guidance for us, and we within our ability we try to understand it in the best possible way. So in the past, like we've said, different ulama put on different lenses, but maybe gave tafsir from a different angle, if that makes sense. So, some of them looked at it from a language, the amazement of the tafsir of the Quran from maybe from a language perspective. And we see this from Imam al-Zarqashi, radiallahu anhu, in his great tafsir, Al-Kashaf. Some other ways, that some mufassirin have looked at it from a fiqh perspective, like Imam al-Qurtubi. Some of them focus on the spirituality aspect of it, which came a bit later on, like Imam al-Razi and al-Alusi, radiallahu anhum. And some of them just, put a lot of things together and made very big volumes of tafsir. Shawkani's got a great tafsir on that. Some of them kept it very basic, and maybe looked at the basics of nahu and looked at the basics of qira'at like Al-Jalalain, which is one of the books that we're studying with Ustadh Khalid. Nasafi as well. So there's some of the, I guess, some of the different ways that tafsir can be looked at. And then even the ones that went into depth, radiallahu anhum, they would mention that you can't even give it its complete justice. Allahu alim. So from the tafsirs that we have written down or we have mentioned here, without a doubt, hands down, I think the majority of merit would have to go to Imam al-Tabari, radiallahu anhu, who's also known as Ibn Jarir, radiallahu anhu, and his kitab or his book was one of the first tafsir put together, only 300 years after the Hijrah, radiallahu anhu. And what we call his tafsir is a tafsir bil-ma'thur, which is a collection of narrations about certain ayat. So what he did, radiallahu anhu, it's a great reference point. And we'll see the quotes of many that came after him that would reference and say, we owe so much to Imam al-Tabari for what he did. And the likes of Imam Nawawi saying that no one has done the work in tafsir like Ibn Jarir did. We owe so much merit to him, and you'll see it's all the mufassir. You go into other tafsir, and they'll always more than always have a quote from Ibn Jarir. Imam al-Tabari saying he said 1, 2, 3, 4, or he gave us this reference. So they'll reference him. So it's considered one of the main references. Very deep. So what he did, radiallahu anhu, was he looked, like we said, at every source, every narration that ayah or that surah had, and he listed them. And then in some instances, he would give his preference, or he'd give maybe from the narrations, I would take so and so from it. But it is a great reference book. So in depth, radiallahu anhu, that even maybe the Fatiha has something like 150 pages of its tafsir. And like we said, there's a few key points that they give. He says he relies very highly on the narrations of the Prophet ﷺ and the Sahaba and the Tabi'in, and lists them. He lists the sanads. He lists the sanads of where he got that. Obviously, not far away, so it would be a handful of sanads. And you look at the different versions narrated. Or you wouldn't call it a criticism, but he put everything in there. So it's really a great book for those knowledgeable in tafsir to go back and say, well, no, I'll take that above that narration. And so on. He gives a lot of information about the nasikh and mansukh also. And he narrates what is authentic and what is maybe less authentic. I mean, he gives the linguistic and analysis of it as well, radiallahu anhu. And in some points, he provides some links between verses as well. So he looks at its coherence. Radiallahu anhu. That's Imam al-Tabari. So that's called a Tafseer bil-Ma'thur. So a Tafsir through narrations. Similar to that, we have Tafsir ibn Kathir, which we'll come to. But if we're going to look at it chronologically, after that we have the Tafsir of Al-Qurtubi, radiallahu anhu. And his one looked at the fiqh aspect of a tafsir. So he looked at it more from a jurisprudence perspective. So he'll look at the tafsir and list different tafsir. So he'll list the fiqh aspect of this. This ayah is used for the fiqh aspect of this, and so on and so forth. He wasn't Maliki in his madhab. So at times I think he inclines towards that, which is no problem at all. And he uses those proofs. Radiallahu anhu. Like we said, chronologically, we have Ibn Kathir, which I think maybe is maybe the most popular nowadays. Is maybe one of the most popular nowadays for the common person. Beautiful tafsir, very basic but comprehensive. And again, he's similar to At-Tabari, where it's a tafsir bil-Ma'thur, where he narrates. He came a bit later, so he had the ability to go through and look at the authenticity of different narrations when it came to the certain ayat, and filter out those that weren't maybe as authentic. And his tafsir is called Tafsir al-Quran al-Azim. It's a very great tafsir, radiallahu anhu. And he also lists some of the sanads in there. But like we said, he provided a bit of extra caution when it came to giving the authenticity of what was being, I guess, transmitted. All these, before I get into Jalalain, all these, including the tafsir of Jalalain and any tafsir you see, there's a whole list of things that these scholars need to tick off before they actually give tafsir. So they're all great scholars, and you see them, they were either judges, or they were either they mastered so many other fields, and then they wrote their books in tafsir, and they're well known for these. But it doesn't mean they weren't masters in any other field. They had to master many other fields, and they were, I guess, references in those fields as well. Wallahu a'lam. Then we have the tafsir of al-Jalalain, and it's called tafsir al-Jalalain because it's the translation is the tafsir of the two Jalalains, or the two Jalals, which is Jalaluddin al-Suyuti radiallahu anhu, who is the author of al-Itqan, which is maybe the most prominent kitab when it comes, or the most prominent references when it comes to Uloom al-Quran radiallahu anhu. We've mentioned it in our past lessons. And he was the student of Jalaluddin al-Mahayli radiallahu anhu. So Jalaluddin al-Mahayli radiallahu anhu, he started this tafsir, which again is maybe a beginner to intermediate level tafsir, which alhamdulillah we've had the honor of going through the vast majority of it with our mashayikh. A beautiful tafsir. He'll go sometimes into the nahu aspect of things and the grammar aspect of things and the different qira'at, which we'll look at further on in our lectures. But yeah, so Jalaluddin al-Mahayli radiallahu anhu passed away, and his great student Jalaluddin al-Suyuti, Imam al-Suyuti, finished it off, and he kept a very similar structure to his teacher in his commentaries and that sort of thing. So again, a very popular tafsir, but they're the main, I guess they'd be the main tafsir, I wouldn't say the main four, but four very popular tafsir that are used when it comes to tafsir, and some of them are used in different madaris, and some of them are used just as a general person to pick up and make some tafsir on. Again, we need to have a bit of knowledge when we get into these. You can't just pick up, for instance, Imam al-Tabari's and now read it, and people might do that and take maybe one of his weaker narrations and say, this is the tafsir of that. No, we need to have a bit of commonality. We need to have a bit of understanding before we go into that. Some other tafsir, and we'll finish off with this. Some other tafsirs that are out there that we can possibly go into and read is we have Mafatih al-Ghaib, which is also known as Tafsir al-Kabir. And that's from Imam al-Razi radiallahu anhu, which we mentioned earlier. And he really focused, again, he was a great theologian radiallahu anhu, and he paid a lot of extra attention to the spiritual aspect of it, the spiritual aspect of the Quran. He was one of the first, you could say, that he challenged the past mufassirin, in the sense of they would just narrate, which is absolutely, I'm not criticizing that in any way, but he took on the challenge and said, well, we're going to not neglect that aspect of it, but he added extra to it, in that spiritual aspect of it, and he refuted a lot of maybe different ideologies of his time. We have Ruh al-Ma'an, which is also, like I said, a similar aspect, where he looks at the spirituality, and that was by Imam al-Alusi radiallahu anhu, and he went into heaps of depth. There's Tafsir of al-Nasafi, there's Al-Kashaf by Shaykh al-Zamakhshari, and Shaykh al-Shawkani, and there's many others, and you come across hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of tafsir. Again, it's important to go through them with a teacher and someone that's covered them. So may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept from us. So that's the introduction, that's the part 2 of tafsir. So the tabi'een and some of the prominent tafsirs that are out there and are used as reference points. So just a quick recap, I'll go over the whole tafsir. So like we said, we looked at how we get to tafsir. So we had the tafsir of the Quran via the Quran, the tafsir of the Quran via the Sunnah, the tafsir of the Quran via the sayings of the Sahabi, and the tafsir of the Quran via the Tabi'een, and then the Arabic language. Looked at some of the prominent Sahaba that were known for their tafsir, and we've zoned in on Abdullah bin Mas'ud and Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu, and then we looked at some of the Tabi'een and some of their students that were well known, and some of the key works in tafsir that are available to us. Not all of them are available in English, but certainly Jalalain is available in English. Ibn Kathir is definitely available in English as well. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept from us. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala make it easy for us. And I think next lesson we'll be looking at Allahu A'lam, Asbab al-Nuzul, and the Makkah and Madinah verses. سبحان الله وبحمده سبحان الله وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك.